All right, hello everyone. This is January 13th and our editor weekly UX product and design sync is about ready to start. So I have just a couple quick items in the products section. And Michael, you added one, thank you. I think that this came up before about a group conversation or some kind of presentation related to settings and navigation, specifically the progress towards our OKR or lack thereof. In this case, I think we've made great progress towards the OKR and should finish up pretty strong there, thanks to the completion of the solution validation and the work of the team to ship a couple things in 13.8. I will look into this. I don't know what the calendar looks like for group conversations. I think that's probably going to be the most effective thing. I know it was pretty well received for Static Site Editor when we did that one to kind of address everybody's questions about what we're actually working on and how they can give feedback. Yeah, I'll check on the schedule there. That'll be an action item for me.
When do you think that would happen? Like, I guess after the end of this quarter?
Yeah, I think to wrap up the quarter, probably if I could get on the calendar for the maybe second week of February, something like that,
Okay.
that would probably be ideal. We would have, well, let's see, we're January 13th, maybe it might be better for like end of February because we have some really great work shipping in or slated for 13.9, and if we could just show even in staging or like prior to rolling out on the omnibus, like just on .com, like a couple other things that might be even more effective, even though it won't technically be part of our quarterly OKR. It could we're about to like implement some of the stuff that we would be talking about, so it might be good to just have some of that I can demo for the group conversation. But I'll look at the schedule. If that doesn't work out, then sometime in February.
Oh, that sounds good. That'll give more time for kind of taking together all the findings from the research and putting together a report and some recommendations. So that's good.
Yeah. Specifically, I'm thinking about being able to demo and show the searchable settings that are right now behind a feature flag and the work that you just validated, Michael, on the user drop-down menu. Those are both relatively minimal effort, so I feel confident we're going to ship them in 13.9, but they have high impact and they were validated in the process of working this quarter, so it'd be great to just show that they're shipped. So moving on, Michael, you want to voice over this question or topic?
So this yesterday there was a support comment that popped up again around the frequently visited links in the drop-down menus for projects and groups. And yeah, I think in the moment that seeing that, I was like, oh, what do we need to actually validate to say it's okay to go ahead with like just making the change? Because if we go through the history of how frequently appeared into the world, it seemed almost like magical because the initial plans were always to have recently visited. But I think we did some work to add some tracking onto that. But yeah, it goes back to like, oh yeah, we should try to find that dashboard or get that dashboard to understand what people are clicking on. But yeah, I think I answered my own question there.
Yeah, I mean, I think data is the way to do it. Sorry, I'm distracted by Amber Alert or something on my phone. Just making sure it wasn't something I needed to like take shelter or something. Okay. Yes, data is is the answer. And I think Chad had some initial dashboard for a query that we could look at here when he instrumented that, and it never made it into a full dashboard, but I believe the data is available. So we'll take a look at how often users are interacting with that area. And I think if we are going to make the change, making the change when we address that top nav proposal that you have makes the most sense, rather than just switching it out and then continuing to iterate. That could just be one of the phases of that iteration. Yeah, I think when we're breaking those out into issues and working on an iteration plan, just making an issue for switching it to frequent and then having the discussion in the issue would probably be the best approach to make sure it's documented and everything.
Cool. I'm just going to take this moment and just segue into my one point in design. Yeah, I'll create the epic for consolidating the top nav sometime today. I didn't get a chance to do it last week, so yeah.
That's perfect. I appreciate it. I have been meaning to make it as well for a couple of weeks, just in preparation for the wrap up of the validation, and that would be helpful. I think the 13.9 planning was going really well. I met with Roman, even though he's just finishing up some of his leave. We chatted yesterday about 13.9. We have a good, chunk of issues to work on. We have plenty of work to do, but we did kind of identify this work as something we would do in 13.10, the top nav. So anything we can do to refine the issues now and start planning. We also may have some front end bandwidth to pick up at least some technical exploration or first MVCs behind a feature flag, or just generally like start momentum on this work in 13.9. So it's likely when I record the kickoff call on tomorrow, because we don't have Friends and Family Day, it might slip to Friday. Try not to work that day, but as I record the kickoff call, I probably will highlight your solution validation and just show where we're headed, and then say that it's not going to ship in 13.9, but we'll start working on it. So yeah, anything you can do to prepare, I'll certainly help, put it in the right place and parent it to the right epics, and as much as necessary. Just let me know if you need any help. We speaking of milestone planning, 13.10 I think is going to be when I'd like to shift a bit of our focus back towards the static site editor in a way, but in the sense that I want to start executing on Enrique's architecture for the new WYSIWYG editor, the rich text editor. We had a review on Monday, and it went, in my opinion, very well. I think we have strong buy-in from leadership that this is one of our top opportunities for the group to consolidate the editing experience around a single rich editor, and starting with wiki or issue descriptions, depending on which one has the lowest level of complexity. We would like to carve out some time in 13.9 to build out these epics and issues and make sure we have a good plan in place and an MVC that's achievable, so that we can start in 13.10. The link to the opportunity canvas, I don't believe it's public, but it's open to everybody in GitLab, is in the agenda. But the feedback was very positive. Everybody seemed on board with our approach. I was able to, articulate the benefits of the approach as far as modularity and reusability. Everybody's really, really on board with having a consistent editing experience across GitLab and especially when it comes to the opportunities that it will open up later, like being able to extend the editor to support mermaid diagrams or draw.io diagrams or something like that, and then have that work done in one place and then reused across multiple areas. So all that under the umbrella of reusability and consistency. And those are key themes for our group and the company in general right now. So everybody's on board. Very happy to hear that. I think that's all to report back. I did leave a note that maybe in the process of creating this iteration plan, it might be helpful to have one or two directional mock-ups for how this might look in the wiki or in issue descriptions, as far as like the MVC goes. Like I think we've explored in the past what it could look like in its ideal state, and but now that we've identified the actual architecture, the actual projects and features that will be inherent in it, and we know that we're going to go with standard pajamas design system, I think putting it together and making it very clear what we're building for the MVC would be helpful. Not that you're not busy, Michael, but let's maybe find some time.
That's my next question. I was curious, from a timeline perspective, when would be ideal to have that ready? Like,
I think we probably have enough for at least a couple weeks before we need to, probably more than that before it actually changes our plans. Like I think this would be more for like addressing conversations about, oh, well, like, are we gonna have image uploads in the MVC, or like what buttons, where should the buttons go, and what options will actually be available, and things like that. A lot of it can be done communicating via text and in the issues and in writing, but it would be good, especially to speak to like by 1310 kickoff, like having a visual to speak to is very helpful. So sometime in the next like 2 to 4 weeks, probably.
Awesome. Thank you.
I dropped this last link in here because we talked about this during the issue refinement today, and I thought it was just kind of an interesting product principle and discussion. So I wanted to surface it here as it related to settings and in general. But there was an issue and a discussion on multiple issues going around last week, and it opened up a conversation that I had been aware of, but not necessarily weighed in on directly as the new PM. There are several issues out there that have been created over the years to like turn off the web IDE or disable editing from within GitLab. Most of them I saw were rooted in the desire to enforce other development environments on a team. So like maybe they really just want somebody to use VS Code because they have a very specific implementation or some plugins that they require in a organization. At a certain point, though, this becomes overwhelming to have too many settings, as we know, because we have too many settings already. It's not something I'm inclined to prioritize. We don't have enough demand to override our principles of defaulting to on and having an opinionated perspective. I also feel like I don't fully understand the impact of turning off web editing altogether across the entire application, because turning off the web IDE is one thing, but you could do the same thing. You could achieve the same goal of bypassing your team's editor of choice by using the single file editor and making edits through the web there. Turning that off, I feel like has bigger implications. There's also the upcoming like pipeline editor, and not having access to that is a whole other, a whole other part of the application that you would be turning off. I had previously, kind of just aligned with our decision that had been made before that we should not turn off web editing as a toggle in the settings. Pending demand, my convictions are strong but loosely held, right? Like I can be convinced by data that this is the wrong stance to take, but for now I think that's where we stand. And this issue came up that actually highlighted a very valid reason why you wouldn't want to use the web IDE, which is that the web IDE can't commit, it can't provide signed commits, and you can't do that at all through the web interface. Right now, we don't have a workaround for that, and the web IDE actually can commit to projects that have enabled only signed commits. So it's kind of a way around that. At least that's what I understand. I haven't been able to verify that because I don't have a project set up in that way, and so I need to do that. Anyhow, the discussion, you can watch the recording, but the decision was basically, instead of addressing the request in this issue, which is to disable the web UI or the web editing because it can't do signed commits, the solution that we're looking towards is actually to provide the ability to sign commits through the web editor. And until that time, we would want to respect the settings of the project and prevent users from committing from the web IDE if the project requires signed commits. So there's probably two issues. The easier one is putting an error and disabling the commit button for those projects that have that setting turned on, which is only available in Premium and Ultimate. But if we can at least get that done, at least then we're not like a workaround for these people who rightfully want to have their workflows enforced and their signed commits, 100% signed commits on their project. And then I think it'll be us collaborating with the source code group to figure out an approach for signed commits in the web, which honestly I don't know enough about to propose a solution. It sounds like others have figured out a way around this, but we certainly wouldn't want anybody we wouldn't want to be prompting anybody to upload their private key into GitLab or anything like that. It defeats the purpose of having a private key. So
you said there was a recording for this. Which recording were you referring to?
Yeah, I just spammed the channel. So this was the backlog refinement in this was today, earlier today for me. I don't remember exactly how far into it. I think it was probably about 15 minutes into the chat we started talking about this.
Cool.
So yeah, for those watching this recording, it should be the previous recording on our playlist, the issue refinement session for the editor group on January 13th.
Got it.
Right. I feel like I've rambled enough. Catherine, you want to jump into some research topics?
Sure. Oh, but I also had a thought related to disabling the editors, but not exactly that topic, but it's something I've seen in a couple other places, like for example, the merge request templates, how you can add a checklist, and then someone would write in saying, my team members are not clicking all the check boxes on this list. How can I enforce this? Or on the other hand, I think it was also in the description templates, it was kind of like, my team members are erasing parts of this template. How can I make parts of it required? And so it's this interesting thing where it's kind of a team process problem, but they want to handle it and enforce it in GitLab, but we're not sure where we kind of land on that because it's extra configuration and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is, but I've seen that in a couple other places.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It does come down to just, workflow and team, like, collaboration best practices, enforcing how you want to work with your team. To an extent, we have some settings related to that, like enforcing signed commits or push rules in general, and merge request templates. But like making them required, yeah, it's a tough thing to enforce, but not make too overwhelming for configuration, right? Because any enforcement would require some configuration of the rules to enforce. In this case, I also kind of feel like if your engineers on your team are using the web IDE to go around something that you've told them they need to do, like use, say, like Eclipse as their IDE, then they're probably have a problem with the IDE, and they're going to find another way around. It's not really up to us to disable web IDE. It's not going to prevent them from finding a way around your requirement necessarily. Maybe sometimes that might be a little naive, and maybe there are some cases where this is the only workaround that's possible, but I kind of have a feeling these people are smart and they'll find a way around it if there is a way.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's almost like there would be a couple considerations. It's like, are they not using this thing because it's not usable or something, I know, on our end that could be improved? Is it more of a team process problem? Or is it just you think GitLab should provide more control and things like that? But yeah, it's a
I mean, I think it's just been an interesting issue for me to process, because it helps illustrate some of the gaps in the web IDE being adopted by organizations, and for any reason why they specifically would not want people to use it is a data point for me to understand how we can make web IDE better. Another specific example, I know I said I was going to turn it over to you, but another example was like, I think it was a university that wanted to teach a course, or maybe it was a high school, but an educational institution that wanted to teach a course, and they wanted to make sure their students were committing from the command line and learning Git flows that way. And the web IDE allows them to kind of abstract and simplify that by opening the file, making a change, and clicking a button to commit. I can see, why they want their students to be limited and follow the instructions, but I kind of feel like that was just, you got to just tell your students to do it this way. Find a way to assess that knowledge elsewhere, because we can't like build that complexity in the product to enforce artificial constraints, I guess.
right. Yeah, definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm interested to hear about the left sidebar research. So
So basically we have 2 points related to this. So the first point is more of an overview of kind of the plan over the next couple of weeks. And then the next point, I think we can talk a bit more about just like what we saw in this study. So I'll just share, well, actually maybe I'll share my screen. It's kind of not needed, but I will do it anyway. I'll share my screen at this portion, but basically what I've shared here is an epic. It used to be an issue, but it's now an epic. And what I've been finding from these left sidebar studies, but also a parallel study that's going on around the documentation site, is that and also the operations first click test, is that we kind of need to take a step back and take a bigger look at the mental model of our users and understand what they're thinking of, the way we're categorizing items, what they even expect to do in certain places. When they first sign into GitLab, what do they expect to see there? When they're doing another task and they're trying to get somewhere else, what are they basically expecting to see along the way versus like, what are the fixed navigational elements that we have that are just always there? So what I plan to do over the next couple of weeks is to take in the results from our different benchmarking studies, consolidate the findings across each study and create a report on kind of like the state of the nav bars. Because basically in each study, we'll get information on the success rate, the time it took to complete a task, and some confusing areas of the nav and successful areas of the nav. And what I want to do is look across each study to see if there's overlap. Because in any individual study, sometimes you could have problems that are due to users not understanding the task itself. Maybe they didn't understand the wording of it, or they'd never heard of that feature before. So we kind of want to look across the various studies to see if there are certain areas like, okay, in all levels, the repository is causing some confusion or that sort of thing. And then what I also want to do is some competitor analysis, which is to look at navigation in similar products, as the goal isn't there to just copy what's on another product, but it's more to see what users who either have used these products before, like for example, GitHub, which is a major competitor, and like Travis CI or Jenkins and things like that. What are the ways that they're categorizing information? Because that might give some insight into how our information could be categorized as well, if we're seeing patterns around the way that our major competitors are doing it. It may not be ideal. It kind of depends on whether they did all this research as well. But at the very least, you could find what users are expecting to see if they're using similar products as well. And they kind of go from one to the other and how they might think about it. So that's one component. And then from all of this, the goal is to basically analyze the content that we have in the left sidebars. So analyzing what information should be in there and why, kind of why it was added there. Was it more of a discoverability concern? You know, a group implemented a new feature and wanted to display it there so people could find it. Was it a link to something that's commonly needed, some of the most popular tasks or things like that, or a job to be done? Just kind of mapping out what type of information we have already and if that aligns with the way that we want to structure it going forward. So that's kind of like the next step that'll come from that. And the goal is to just take all these different inputs and come up with some proposed improvements and then to do some testing of that proposal. And then you can compare that back with the benchmarking studies to see which on which structures users were more successful. So that's kind of the whole overview of the plan. And I wanted to just share that so that if you're also familiar with other navigation structures, or if you think there's anything interesting that we could take a look at, feel free to share it in this epic or bring it up, because that would be really helpful. Do you have any thoughts on anything else that could be done during this effort?
Well, this is great, and I'm very excited. This is obviously a huge area of where we can improve, and a really great plan to do that. When it comes to competitors, you may already have these on your radar, but I think finding some, not necessarily competitors, but other like large scale applications, platforms like Salesforce or Atlassian that might have similar problems that they've tried to solve, where they have like a huge breadth of user personas, and they need to solve a whole bunch of needs in a single navigation menu or something like that. Salesforce and Atlassian are the two that come to mind, but I'll try and think of some more.
That's a really good point. That's something that I was considering for, like, for example, the documentation site. We have a similar left sidebar problem,
Hmm.
and I'm not sure how from scratch we're going to go in GitLab.com, but I don't know. We'll just consider different proposals of how competitors, but also, as you're saying, companies that are kind of solving problems for different groups of users or different types of products, how they present this information to people. Because I'm not sure if we need to go big, or, it would still be like an incremental rollout, but I basically, I don't know how different this will look right now.
Sure.
But it's interesting. But yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that.
Cool. My 2 cents on this is I really like the approach of looking at the different studies that have been done and then seeing the overlaps, because I think that's an interesting area that we may have overlooked in just analyzing one individual one at a time. So I think that's really good. Regarding the content analysis, is that when you're thinking of doing more like problem validation studies where you're like getting people to card sort or kind of tree jacking or whatever activity to like understand how they would map the content or where they would think content should live?
Yeah, so this is interesting because I'm not 100% sure what approach I'll take here yet, but I do think going back to card sorting for certain areas could be useful. Um, we've done card sorting in the past before this nav kind of organically grew. So I might go back into some of those as well and see what we learned from that, and then build from there. But if you have any thoughts on what you might like to see or what you think would be helpful, feel free to let me know.
Yeah. So I think that's exactly it. The word you used there was organically grown. The navigation over time it's just grown like that, and I think we should focus more of our efforts on where users think content should be versus what our mental model is. And it's like the clash of the mental models is our biggest problem right now. For
Right.
example, calling projects and repositories synonymously all over the place, but it's not. Like things like that, and mapping like what our users think, what we think, and seeing where that kind of lines up. I think that would be a better kind of time spent on like if you're ordering priority, I would love to see that higher than, let's say, competitor analysis, because in a way competitor analysis we've kind of done in our own little weird way in like exploring different ways of presenting projects groups or like the left sidebar. Some of the stuff that Nick posted a while ago, where he was looking at
Mm.
what happens if GitLab operated like Salesforce, and what happens if it looks like this other way, different ways of presenting that information. And I think that's all fine, but I think that makes more sense if we say like the reason we're going with this structure is that like it maps with the way our users think about hierarchical groups, because I think that is a key thing in GitLab that's different than GitHub, where we have this idea of like this hierarchy of projects and groups, and then you get into the repository versus like just a list of repositories associated to one group. There's this nested hierarchy of global things versus project
Yeah.
level instancing versus group things. And yeah, and hence I think the mental model, mapping the mental models would be a lot more effective.
Yeah,
And that's,
I think that's a
and
great
then
point.
and then we probably could do the competitor analysis as a group. Like you can split that off or give that off to someone else to do, but I would want to focus your efforts on content analysis and with a future looking, rather than saying like why did we put certain things here. I think that'd be good to tell a story of like, oh, we put this here, but sometimes that reason might have been we didn't know where else to put it, so we just stuck it there. But I think it'd be more bias for action, or that principle where we think about where should we take things, where we just say like things are the way they are. We can play detective and try to figure out, or we can say, no, this is where it should be. So we're like, okay, this is where the new goal is, and let's figure out a way to get there. We don't really worry about why it got into that state. But I
Yeah.
think setting the future pose and saying this is the rules or like guidelines of why we think it should happen this way, then I think that would help with the future, because one of the problems we have right now is there is no rhyme or reason to add things to issues, or should it be a new menu item. We don't have a rule defining in product to say, yes, if we're going to do something, this is why we do it. And I think um, something for this group is that like establishing the rules or like the guidelines on when to add things to a menu item, when to add it as a first level, second level. I think that will be really helpful for the organization.
Yeah. That was great. That was wonderfully put. And that ties into a lot of what I want to think about. And I almost think I might experiment with starting from scratch in the card sort, because, you could do different types of card sort. You can do a closed one where you already give them the categories and they sort things into it. You could do open, where there's just a list of cards and they create their own categories, or you can do the hybrid where there's closed categories, but they could also create new ones. And I'm thinking to start open, and it's what those cards will be that I'm still trying to determine, because we have so many different personas trying to do different things in GitLab. I need to think a bit more about the jobs to be done and how to handle that, whether it's different card sorts for different jobs, different personas, or if it's a general card sort for a sample of GitLab users. I don't know, but
Cool.
definitely going to be thinking through that.
Yeah. So whenever you create that issue, like, yeah, ping me and I'd love to like share my thoughts on that, because like in all great product answers, it depends, right?
Yes, exactly. Awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, just to reiterate, Michael, I think what you said was spot on about meeting our users where their expectations are, and mapping to those, and then helping define those rules and document those rules, because we don't want to have to be in this position another 18 months where we're cleaning it up and doing a big overhaul, right? If we can identify those patterns and the decision-making process is a little more clear, then we can document that in pajamas. We can document that for our product teams, and categories can be empowered to make the right decisions in the future. And certainly, yeah, all of the current options will need to get cleaned up and find a good pattern for those. But if the logic for why we made that decision isn't clear to the entire company, then we could find ourselves in the same place fairly quickly, given the rate that we introduce new features.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, it's a big and interesting thing, because we introduced so many new features, but I really couldn't, well, there are some of them I know why. They're kind of like maybe the flagship or the important feature of the category or area.
Mm-hmm.
But there are others where you're like, well, why didn't that feature get added here? In theory, it could be added, but it didn't. I don't know why. But yeah, it'll be really important to have a system for that going forward. And I talked a lot about this point, and I think we're out of time. Are we out of time?
I've got a few more minutes, but yeah.
Yeah, we're out of time, but I think
see.
it was a useful deep dive on that point. So I appreciate that, Catherine. Don't worry about going over time for that.
Oh yeah, but basically for this, for your point down there, Michael, about iterations, were you kind of thinking, in theory, if we were going to make a change, like, is that us or who? but I guess project management.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like that one from the left side tree test. It was like, oh, like this iterations thing. It's like, you know, are you planning to share this with the rest of the different groups so that they can take action and read it and take their own action? Because some of those things like iterations feels like there's an opportunity to do something there, but I don't think it should be us to say yes, we should move it over here or not, or would this
Right.
be waiting upon um, that left nav thing that you just talked about on the future vision or like the direction of that, like
Yeah, I would say that at the very least, I would want to consider across the different benchmarking tests that we did for the left sidebar, just to see if there were anything related to the task that was kind of throwing people off, because sometimes the task wording really does mess with things, unfortunately. But yeah, basically putting a pin in there, iterations is an area that also caught my attention from that test. But it's what was interesting about it was that I'm trying to remember, I don't have it in front of me, but I remember seeing overlap with the productivity area in analytics. That was one area that I remember seeing people going to look for things about the 2-week cycles and velocity. But at the same time, it may not belong somewhere like that if you're thinking about the process of actually creating the iteration. That might be more related to the issue. So it kind of depends. Like the burn down chart in the iterations might make more sense and might be more aligned with analytics, but the actual creation of the iteration might be more aligned with the issue. That's why I would want to think about that a little bit more before kind of sharing it more broadly. Did that make sense? By the way.
yeah, makes a lot of sense, and thank you for clarifying.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, we're over time, so I don't want to keep anybody, but this has been a great conversation, and look forward to more updates related to the left nav. I think that's probably good after, because I feel like we've come up with a really great iterative approach to the top nav. The problems related to groups and projects and instance level features, and I really think we're going to have an impactful change there. So as we work on that,
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the left nav being the next area of focus and getting that cleaned up, because honestly, if we can just fix those two things and then like clean up the settings a bit, I feel like we'll have made a great impact this year.
Yeah, it's super exciting, especially the top nav bar things. It's like an area that it doesn't necessarily make or break the experience, because you can still achieve most of those tasks even if you can't do it with a top nav. But as I was seeing in the solution validation findings, just how excited some of the participants were about the consolidated drop downs and things like that. And oh my goodness, it's really an example of some opportunity for delight and surfacing new things. So
yeah,
very
cool.
exciting.
Well, have a great rest of the day to both of you, and I will chat with you on Slack and in issues, and hope that you will take our Friends and Family Day on Friday.
Awesome. Hope you both have a great day as well.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.